On a stormy night in the Baltic Sea, more than 850 people died in what remains the deadliest peacetime shipwreck in European waters. The cruise ferry MS Estonia went down in less than an hour, a disaster so quick and so catastrophic it's almost impossible to imagine. But even more shocking is the story that has unfolded in the 3 decades since. A story of a flawed investigation, admissions of secret military cargo, and evidence that sparked a massive hunt for the truth. On September 28, 1994, the MS Estonia sank, claiming 852 lives. The official report blames a broken bow door, torn off by heavy seas. But what if that official report is wrong? What if the ship was being used for something secret? And what if a mysterious hole, found decades later, is the key to it all? This is the story of Europe's worst modern maritime disaster and the 30-year search for what really happened. The MS Estonia wasn't just a ship, she was a powerful symbol of freedom. As one of the largest and most prestigious vessels sailing under the Estonian flag, she represented a new era for the country which had just regained its independence from the Soviet Union. Her route between Tallinn, Estonia, and Stockholm, Sweden, was more than a simple transport link. It was a bridge connecting a newly opened Eastern Europe with the West. The night of September 27, 1994, felt completely ordinary. On board were 989 people, families coming home from vacation, truck drivers on their regular run, and tourists exploring a new corner of the world. As the ferry pushed into the open Baltic, however, the weather turned nasty. Winds howled and waves swelled to nearly 6 meters high. A rough night, but not unheard of for the Baltic in autumn. For the first few hours, everything seemed normal. But then, just before 1 a.m., a series of loud metallic bangs jolted passengers and crew. Survivors described it not just as a sound, but as a feeling of violent shudder that ran through the entire ship. Many thought it was just the waves slamming against the hull. They were tragically wrong. They were hearing the sound of the ship's bow visor, the massive multi-ton steel door at the front being torn apart. The locks failed under the relentless pounding of the waves. Around 1:15 a.m., the entire visor ripped off and vanished into the sea, dragging the loading ramp open behind it. All at once, the huge car deck was exposed to the raging storm. Thousands of tons of water flooded in, and the effect was instant and catastrophic. The ship lurched violently to one side, a list so severe it tossed sleeping passengers from their bunks and sent furniture, vending machines, and panicked people sliding across the decks. Water poured down stairwells and burst through ceiling panels, plunging the lower decks into a terrifying chaos of darkness and icy water. A calm female voice came over the loudspeaker. "Alarm! Alarm! There is alarm on the ship," but for many, it was too late to even understand. The Mayday call went out just after 1:20 a.m., the signal weak and the message frantic. Operators on other ships struggled to grasp the scale of the emergency. Within minutes, the ship was tilted so far that escape became nearly impossible. Hallways had become vertical shafts and staircases were almost horizontal. Those on the lower decks were trapped. On the upper decks, a desperate fight for survival began. People tried to claw their way up steeply angled floors to get outside, only to face screaming winds and a deck slick with sea spray. The rescue effort was a race against time that was over before it even started. By the time the first helicopters arrived, the MS Estonia was gone. Around 1:50 a.m., less than an hour after the first bang, the ship slid beneath the waves, stern first, taking 852 people with her. Only 137 survived, most of them young, strong men who managed to endure the brutal climb and the frigid water. In the wake of the tragedy, Estonia, Finland, and Sweden launched a joint investigation. The final report, released in 1997, was clear. The bow visor's locks were too weak for the storm. They broke, the car deck flooded, and the ship sank. Case closed. But from the very beginning, that explanation felt too simple for survivors and victims' families. It didn't seem to account for how incredibly fast the ship went down. It also didn't explain the loud bangs that many survivors insisted sounded like an explosion or a collision. And just like that, the seeds of doubt were planted. For decades, these doubts fueled conspiracy theories. Then, information started to emerge that made some of those theories seem not so far-fetched. The first major crack in the official story centered on secret military transports. For years, rumors swirled that the MS Estonia was being used to smuggle military tech out of a newly free Russia, and for years, officials denied it. But it turned out to be true. Swedish authorities eventually admitted that military equipment was transported on the ferry on September 14th and 20th, 1994, just days before it sank. They insisted nothing explosive was on board and that no such cargo was present on the night of the disaster. But the admission proved the ferry was used for secret operations. A former Swedish customs officer even came forward, saying he was ordered not to inspect certain vehicles arriving on the Estonia. It made people ask, was there unregistered military cargo on the ship that night, and could it have been a target for sabotage? Then there's the explosion theory. Some independent investigators who examined the recovered bow visor claimed to have found evidence of extreme heat, consistent with a blast. This fit with what some survivors described. While official investigations have never found any trace of explosives, the testimony has remained a stubborn contradiction to the official story. But maybe the most stunning piece of evidence didn't show up until 26 years later. In 2020, a documentary crew, using a submersible drone, filmed the wreck's starboard side-an area that had been buried in the seabed and never fully examined. What they found was jaw-dropping, a huge 4-meter hole in the hull. The discovery of the hole sent shockwaves through the case. Was this the smoking gun? Some immediately suggested a collision. Maybe with a submarine, a plausible idea to some, given the tense geopolitical climate after Russian troops had just left Estonia. This new evidence forced authorities to reopen the investigation. However, reports from these new dives, released in 2023 and 2024, concluded there was no evidence of a collision or an explosion. The official position is that the hole and other damage were caused by the ship hitting the rocky seabed. In February 2024, Swedish prosecutors closed the case again, saying there was no evidence a crime had been committed. And yet, for many, the questions haven't gone away. Investigators in 2023 did admit something huge. The ship was not actually seaworthy when it sailed due to the faulty bow design, something that should have been caught during inspection. The story might just be a tragic accident caused by a fatal flaw, but doubts linger because the official narrative has shifted and information was clearly withheld for decades. The simple truth is, governments denied the military transports that they now admit happened. They insisted there was nothing to see on the starboard side, until a documentary crew proved them wrong. So where does that leave us? 30 years later, we have two competing narratives. One is of a tragic but preventable accident caused by bad design and a brutal storm. The other is a sinister tale of conspiracy, secret cargo, and a cover-up. New investigations have reinforced the original findings, but they've done little to quiet the doubts. After 3 decades of investigations, official reports, and conspiracy theories, we're left with a haunting question. What do you believe really happened to the MS Estonia? This is an incredibly complex case, and I want to know what you think. Based on everything, do you believe the official story, or do you think there's more to it? Let me know your theories in the comments below, and if you want more deep dives into historical mysteries, make sure to subscribe.